From bad to disastrous, on this episode of Driven Too Far, we're talking about when a bad hire coupled with poor safety management leads to catastrophic results. Hello, I'm Andrew Winkler with Chief Carriers, and this is Driven Too Far, the truth about trucking, a podcast that helps over-the-road truck drivers balance career and family. Welcome back to Driven Too Far. On today's episode, I want to talk a little bit about how driver actions plus carrier negligence can lead to a nuclear jury verdict. And that's something I'm sure you've heard the term out there, nuclear verdict. Maybe you aren't quite sure what that means, but by definition, it means a jury award of greater than $10 million. I want to tell you a little, this is a true story about Schneider. I think most of you are familiar with Schneider. Back in the day, they used to run orange trucks. I think some of their trailers are still orange today, but very large and very old carrier. So I think they're somewhere in the neighborhood of 12,000 trucks or maybe more now. But when you think of a carrier that has that kind of experience, as old as they are, as long as they've been around, you would think they probably have some really great processes and safety protocols in place. This is really a story of, in my mind, just an incredible failure by the carrier all the way around. And the reason I wanted to share it with you is because as a driver, you can get pulled into these things, or maybe you're working for a carrier that doesn't have their safety act together and you need to be aware of these things. So this story started back in 2017 with a owner-operator by the name of Jarvis Nance. He appeared to be a single owner-operator, had his own truck. He was traveling down the interstate, and for some reason, he had to make an emergency maneuver to the left lane. So he merges clear left into that emergency lane, that median, and when he was doing that, his truck struck the concrete barrier. So he was okay, but the truck was disabled. So he gets out of the truck to check out the damage to the vehicle, and while he's standing in the median, he gets struck by a pickup that swerves and takes him out. And unfortunately, Mr. Nance was killed on the scene. The pickup in question was two guys in a pickup driven by, or it was owned by a company called High Ridge Partners, and they swerved for whatever reason. As you can imagine, Nance's widow sued for wrongful death. Her husband, her partner, was killed on the side of the interstate of no fault of his own. He wasn't necessarily doing anything wrong, but this pickup comes out of nowhere and swerves and unfortunately hits him. So there's a lawsuit going on, right? And the plaintiff's attorney, Nance's attorney, starts digging into things. They want to figure out what's going on. But when they talk to the two occupants of the pickup from High Ridge Partners, they both mentioned there was a white Schneider truck that had swerved and cut them off. So they made an evasive maneuver, and that's why they swerved over to the left and hit Mr. Nance. Nance's attorney does his thing. He starts to get Schneider involved and say, hey, there's a possibility you had a vehicle that was involved in a fatality accident. We need to look. Can you go back and look at your position records, your satellite records, and see if you happen to have any trucks in this area, this particular date, time on this interstate? And they did. They found one truck in the area during that time frame. So when the driver of the Schneider truck was then interviewed, saying, hey, did you happen to be on this particular interstate on this day and this time? He said, oh, no, he wasn't there. He said he was at a JCPenney warehouse in another city quite a ways away. So that was the story of the driver. But keep in mind, they already knew that truck was there at that time from satellite positioning records. So you got a driver involved and he starts to lie. So here we go. They dig a little bit deeper into the Schneider driver. And one of the things they found with his phone records was the day before the accident, he had made 27 phone calls on that day within a 22-hour period. So what that was telling him was, it didn't matter that he was making phone calls, but what mattered was it was a 22-hour period. So you could come to the conclusion maybe this driver didn't have adequate rest based on the hours of service rules. So it looked like he was up for a long period of time. So the phone records definitely tattled on him there. And what was even more interesting is you go back one more day before that, this Schneider driver had posted his own video on social media site of him doing a live stream trying to back up a truck or demonstrate how to back up a truck. But when he did that, when he was doing the live stream, he actually struck a pole in a parking lot. So you got a guy that's lying about where he was at the day of the accident. The day before, he hasn't got enough sleep. He's been up for 22 hours straight and didn't have enough rest. The day before that, he's doing live video on social media and hitting light poles in the parking lot. So this driver is really a disaster. So as you can imagine, you can kind of see where this might be headed. It's not in great shape for Schneider. Going into this lawsuit, they really don't have a lot to work with. In fact, that's why I say it went from bad to disastrous. It was just a train wreck on the way. But wait, it gets better. So the accident happened in August of 2017. The employment records of that driver show that he was retained by Schneider even after the accident for another 5 months. And he was finally terminated in January of 2018 because of a positive random hair test. He had tested positive for methamphetamines. The driver, apparently when he was terminated for the positive test, he said, no, this can't be right. This is, there must be some other explanation. He doesn't do meth. So he agreed to retest at his own expense of $30 or something like that. Retest, and the second test comes back positive for methamphetamines. So not only did he get hit once, he actually verified the drug test with the second test that he paid for himself. So this is getting brought into the lawsuit as well. Nance's attorney or their attorney's team continues to do their discovery process and go through the driving records, the history, the satellite position records of this particular driver to see what else they can find. And as a plaintiff's attorney, I'm sure what they're looking for is patterns of bad behavior, whether it be by that driver, by the company, whatever it is. Well, they found some more. They found more critical events and hard brake events in that driver's history while he was driving. Well, let's pull up his MVR report and see what we can find there. They found more events on his MVR report in that 7-month time frame when he was employed. So he had some more accidents that were showing up on his MVR report. When the Schneider driver was actually deposed or interviewed through the process, he made an admittance that, one time his supervisor had even told him, his Schneider supervisor had even told him that they have a predictive analytic tool for safety, and that predictive analytic tool said that he would more than likely was going to have an accident soon. So the predictive analytic tool is looking for patterns in the driver's behavior, all these things going on, whether it's the accidents, the MVR, maybe he's got speeding issues and other things happening in the background. It's looking at these things, it's crunching the numbers and going, this guy is high risk. He's going to have an accident at some point. So Schneider knew that, and they kept him employed. Now, most nuclear verdicts out there, when this happens to trucking companies, I wouldn't say the trucking company is always fault-free, but sometimes they get brought in and you can see, you just use a little common sense with a lot of these things. There's a big paycheck out there. There's big money. Sometimes the juries are trying to make a point, but many times the truck lines really aren't at fault. They happen to be in the wrong place, wrong time. Yes, they had maybe a vehicle involved in an accident that was unfortunate, but the driver or the truck line themselves, there was probably nothing they could have done reasonably to avoid that situation, but it doesn't matter. Sometimes the juries are like that. They want to make a statement and they hit them with a big fine. And I can recall one with Werner here a few years back. Maybe you heard of this one down in Texas, and I think it was upwards of, I want to say 97 million, or it was close to 100 million, but it was crazy. It was just, you felt like Werner didn't do anything wrong. They just happened to be the wrong place, wrong time, and they got sucked in. But most of these nuclear verdicts get appealed, right? But I think this one's going to stick, and I'm just going to tell you why. This thing is so backwards. Schneider made so many mistakes, in my opinion, that this one's going to stick. And maybe they even got off the hook easy with 47 million. That's hard to say, but gosh, they ended up retaining this driver after and by the way, he only had was it 4 months experience before they hired him. So he'd only been driving 4 months. They hire him with 4 months experience. 2 months into his stint with Schneider is when he had the accident. So this guy's really inexperienced. Not only that, there was patterns everywhere of this particular driver being unsafe, high risk. You got to get rid of those guys. You can't keep those guys employed. And it appeared what Schneider tried to do, they put him on a performance improvement plan. So like maybe they were going to try to coach him out of it and do better, make sure he was improving or something like that. Not every person or employee deserves that chance to get better. Sometimes the facts are so bad or the risk is so high, you need to terminate them right away. So that's what I wanted to share with you is, this whole process. If you feel like you're maybe working for a company or a carrier that doesn't have their act together, to me, it was just incredible that a company as old and as well run as Schneider is and as well respected in the industry, that they had so many cracks in their safety armor where this driver just kept falling through the cracks with all these things going on. I want to know who was responsible for this guy, who was supposed to be recognizing these patterns of this driver. Somebody certainly fell asleep at the wheel. And unfortunately, it led to just a huge nuclear verdict against Schneider National. So what are the takeaways? I guess what I want you to get out of this episode is, first of all, there's still some cowboys out there, what I call cowboys, and those are drivers that are probably high risk, a little reckless, don't think things are going to happen to them because maybe they have a lot of experience. In this case, this guy didn't have a lot of experience. He didn't have enough training was the problem. But drivers get brought in. Not only was Schneider brought into the lawsuit, this individual driver was named in the lawsuit as well. So I don't know what happened to him. There wasn't any information on that, but I can tell you, I'm going to guess he probably doesn't have his CDL anymore. He's probably going to be personally liable for something as far as the money. And this whole thing probably just ruined this guy's life. So the message is, again, drivers are held accountable in these situations. Make sure you're working for a reputable trucking company. And as you're interviewing carriers to go work for, have a big discussion around their safety program. Don't feel like, oh man, safety's inconvenient, or here we go again, safety people want me to do more training. There's a reason for all that. We have to do this stuff. There has to be continuous training. There has to be protocols that are tight in safety. Maybe you've had just a minor infraction for something and your safety director talked to you and you're, God, what's the big deal? It is a big deal. And this is exactly why that's a big deal. So we have to be very vigilant, and we've got to make sure that we're looking at every detail and working with our drivers and put the best and the safest drivers out there on the road. Thanks for joining us on this episode of Driven Too Far. If you're looking for a carrier that treats safety as a core value, check us out at chiefcarriers.com.